Hey guys, and welcome back in to the Out of Our Minds podcast. This is Nikki here, and you're about to listen to episode 8, where we dive into the topic of the fear of being seen. Now, a few weeks back, Bella and I posted on our story pretty much asking if anyone had any questions or topics that they would want us to discuss on the podcast. And we had this really beautiful question submitted around how to navigate the fear of being seen in relationship. When we saw this, Bella and I decided that it would be super impactful for us to actually do an entire episode on this question alone, just because the fear of being seen is something that can be a subtle yet very powerful force in our life that can impact not only our relationships, but the way that we show up in our entire life, in our careers, in our friendships, the way that we express ourselves creatively. So this topic is so dense, and we're going to talk about it from so many different angles. And you'll hear at the beginning of the podcast me kind of interview Bella on this topic of the fear of being seen in relationship, because this is something that has really sat close to her in her own journey. So you're going to hear Bella kind of dive into her own personal path with really showing up authentically and vulnerably in her long-term partnership. We dive into the topic of really showing our shadow selves to our partners, how to actually utilize long-term partnership as a container for healing and expansion. We dive into the topic of the different stages and cycles of relationships and how to form deeper intimacy. We also dive into the fear of being seen with our careers and how that can halt us from really chasing our dreams and pursuing our passions. So if you are resonating with anything I'm putting down right now, you are going to get a lot out of this episode. Now, before we dive in, I just want to give you guys a little reminder. If you have been enjoying listening to the podcast, feel free to throw us a review on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you're listening on YouTube, feel free to hit that subscribe button. Thank you guys for all the support. And without further ado, let's get into the episode. What's up, guys? I'm Nikki.
I'm Bella. And this is the Out of Our Minds podcast, a playground for mystics and self-explorers to journey through the vast realms of the universe, cultural landscapes, and spiritual expansion.
Join us weekly as we dive into thought-provoking discussions that unveil the mysteries of existence and nurture the growth of our consciousness. How do you navigate relationships through the fear of being seen? All right, Bella, how do you interpret this question, and how does this really land for you? Has this been something that you have navigated in your own relationship? What comes to mind when you hear this question?
Yeah, when I read this, I feel like I knew exactly what this person meant, and just like through my own lens of my own experience. Obviously, there's different ways to interpret it, but my first take on this is essentially especially I'm going to talk about this at first through the lens of a romantic relationship, that there's this idea of like, be your true self, be authentic, right? But there's kind of like a surface level of that where like, yeah, you're just being you, you're having fun, you're being silly, like that's just you. Maybe if that is hard for you, like that's another side note we can go into. But what I see this as is when there are like deeper, darker, shadowy parts of you, maybe there are insecurities or anxieties or just like, doubts or whatever it is in this context of the relationship, or even just about you, that are really scary to show the other person, because deep down you're worried that it will make you unlovable. And I think this is like a really deep fear that a lot of people have, especially if they grew up not necessarily feeling so safe to express the deeper, darker, shadowy emotions, that the idea of showing this person who maybe you think they view you as like so beautiful and happy and fun and go lucky, that if they were to see that you actually have these like, doubts or deep dark thoughts, or you're like insecure about XYZ, that they would look at you differently. And that's been my own experience. And the biggest lesson I've learned in my relationship is this piece. And I guess I'll start by speaking about just some of these like situations that I've been in that speak to this deep fear of being seen. Because I think in the end, that's what it was for me. And like, I think it's tied to a fear of thinking that something in you will be unlovable, or that there's a part of you that's unacceptable, or something that is so taboo and we don't want to see that, like keep it away from us, right? So in my own relationship, I've been with my partner for over 7 years, and it's been the biggest ground for like learning all things about myself, a mirror, like all the things they say about relationships. That's what it's been like. And I have had to work through this exact question of being in a situation where I literally had like a thunderstorm of ideas and thoughts in my mind and being so scared to say them out loud. And these are just things like, it's the kind of thing where your insecurities come up about maybe it's the relationship, maybe it's a fight you had, maybe it's your career and how your partner perceives your success, maybe it's your fear of failing or your fear of not being good enough, or your partner is really good at their job so you want to be really good at yours. Like all the different things that could come up. And having situations where I was like paralyzed and basically choking back, like holding my words in because I was so scared to just say out loud all of the fucking tsunami of thoughts that I was having in my mind. And that's because it was like this fear of, if I say it, what if he thinks about me differently? What if I say something that's so unacceptable that he doesn't love me anymore, right? And the thing that happened when I like held back is it actually, it did the opposite effect, where it actually like put something between us in a way that he wanted. Your partner probably wants to know, like wants to see the deepest parts of you because it helps them love you more. It helps them help you. And so when I did that, it actually like created this opposite effect where my partner wanted so badly to be able to help me and understand me. And I put that shield up of thinking that it would be unacceptable for me to share some deep part of me. So that's kind of like what I plug the personal experience that I plug into this question is those situations where you know that your authentic self includes the shadow, includes the sadness, the grief, the self-doubt, the insecurity. Like that's all human things that we experience. And we get so scared because we want our partner to think that we're like this amazing, like perfect thing. But that idea of perfection is like, it actually includes the flaws and the deeper parts that aren't really flaws. They're just what make you human. So yeah, I think that's at least how I would plug my personal experience into it. And what I interpret this question as is like, how do you get past that? How do you like actually bring your whole self to a relationship and get over that fear of thinking that they're going to like dislike you now or it's going to ruin your relationship?
This is a really beautiful conversation because if both partners in the relationship are self-aware enough to notice when one person is coming to the table with their shadow parts of themselves, maybe they're saying things that aren't actually true, or they're triggered, or they're feeling some kind of way that's rooted in an insecurity or a fear. It's really powerful when the other partner can actually hold space for that in a way where it doesn't mean something about the truth of that person. It's just them needing the space to express a wound or something that is hurting. And then that gives the opportunity for the other partner to actually come in with a deeper level of love and understanding and compassion.
Yes.
And that provides actually a really beautiful healing container for us to express our full selves.
Yes. Like literally the biggest thing that I learned from these scenarios, which I've had so many, and I will admit, like, yeah, every goddamn little insecurity and subconscious belief and little thing that I have basically had blocking me has come to the surface in my relationship. And the times that I actually blurt it out and let it be said are when we get to a deeper place. And I can actually remember very recently, Nikki and I had this, we were bonding on this because we realized we both take it kind of personally when our partner gives us like business advice. And I'm notorious for this. And my partner, Milan, he's amazing. He wants to support me. He wants to see me successful. Like he loves to help me and give me good ideas, right? But I take them personally. I take them as like, it's so funny because this is what I did the last time we talked about this. And it really was so healing for me is I've said out loud, I was like, you know, every time you give me advice, I'm admitting I'm taking it personally. And the reason why is because I'm afraid that if I let you help me, then you get to say like, I told you so, or that I didn't actually do it on my own. And when I said that out loud, he was like, that is so ridiculous. Like, that's not true. That's not real. Like, I want to help you and you still get the credit. Of course, it's your thing, right? So that was my subconscious belief. blocking me from taking good advice because I was so convinced for some reason that I needed to like fight my way through doing business and just have my own ideas. And if I took anybody else's advice, namely like my partner's advice, that it would take away from my own success, which is so ridiculous, right? And so it was like this opportunity to say out loud to his face, like, I'm really trying to listen to you. I really want to get like amazing advice from you, but I'm having a hard time because I have this thing in me that wants to prove myself to you, right? Like that's been another huge belief in my relationship, is just like I'm a little bit younger. And so he's like very good at his job, and he's just by nature of being older, a little bit more like advanced in his career. And so I've always had this like mentee position where I want to prove myself and be like really good at what I do, which is a nice thing to do, right? But that results in like this deeper insecurity that when I'm not aware of it results in like not sharing things or just like being, you know, not fully seen, right, for where I'm at. And so it can manifest in like all sorts of different ways.
So you've openly told him that this is something that is really top of mind for you, right? Like you have told him that this is like a trigger for you, or it's something that your mind is telling you that you're not actually wanting to believe anymore, right? Like that you have to outwardly prove yourself instead of just allowing yourself to be on this journey and be open about what you're going through. That is the key with this, like long-term partnership. If you can be brutally honest about the dark sides of yourself or the shadows, the same way in your own personal healing journey, when you're observing those thoughts and observing the way that your mind is making all this chaos out of nothing, you can do that with your partner.
Yeah.
Because your partner is going to trigger the deepest wounds within you.
Yeah.
That is just like the mechanism of a long-term partnership.
Yes.
The way that we have so intricately attracted each other based on our past and our vibration, and the relationship becomes this place where, yes, love is present, but also our deepest wounds are going to be triggered. So if you can be so honest and open with your partner and know that they will love you no matter what, and if they don't, then maybe it's time to rethink the partnership.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing that's been also in the back of my mind with this is honestly, like those opportunities are really important because you actually want to know what your partner's reaction is, or if they have the space to hold you in that way. And maybe it doesn't, you know, there's nuance here, right? You have to like, this is why, you know, relationships are really personal and everybody has a different situation. But the more that you create those opportunities to be open and see, it's not like a test, but it's like just see how your partner responds. You will then learn more about your partner, and then you can also learn what they're capable of providing you. And maybe it's okay if right now they're not that great at holding your emotions because they have a lot of other stuff going on, but at least you start to put more dynamics into the relationship to give it the room to grow and flourish. And like, I know we've both experienced this. When you go deeper into the place that you really don't want to go, that is where a partnership gets so deep and committed, and the love actually increases when you are willing to show the shadow side of you, right? With the right person, with someone who can hold that and can help you through it. And you want to know if that's your partner, right? If that's something you want and need, you should share those things to see and learn more about the other person.
Right. And to always ask yourself, like, if you think your partner is doing something that's pissing you off, in what way are you perceiving the situation? Or is it a trigger for yourself that you actually have to heal? And this is something that has helped me immensely in my relationship too. When I notice that there's like anger coming up or like frustration, I'm like, okay, let me turn inwards for myself right now. What is it within me that is actually making this scenario more than it needs to be? And how does this actually have nothing to do with him and more to do with me?
Yes.
Because when we're triggered and we're getting angry, it's very easy in partnership to point fingers at your partner. And this is especially true if you're in like that victim mindset of thinking that everything outside of you is responsible for the way that you feel within. When you're in a partnership and you're in that mindset, you're going to blame them for everything.
Right.
And that becomes like a battlefield of all of your ego's wounds. And you're going to constantly be pointing fingers when you really should be looking inwards to see what am I doing for myself right now? If someone is mistreating you or crossing your boundaries, how can you actually turn inwards to say, why am I allowing this to happen? Or if there is a moment of being angry or frustrated, again, how am I perceiving this? What is triggered within me that gets to be healed and looked at in this situation?
Yeah, exactly. That's really important because so much of the time I think, especially kind of in our culture, there's this, things can go two ways. We can kind of have a almost like a self-righteousness in relationships to think that there's nothing on us, and if something goes wrong, it's completely on our partner. And sometimes like excessive, female empowerment and like all this kind of messaging sometimes with men, and like the way we view men can result, I think, in women like having a perception that there's no part of them that needs to like also improve for relationship to work. And I think this, just as an example of what you're saying, is so important to understand when, honestly, in all situations, it benefits you to ask yourself, what is your part in it? Whether that's something you did or if it's just a belief you have, right? Like a subconscious programming or, a trauma that you had that's bubbling up now and being triggered by your partner, right? Like understanding the extreme ownership approach to relationships saves, I think, so much unnecessary blaming that kind of just, it bubbles of resentment. Like when you're just constantly, even without noticing it, like blaming and thinking that your partner is like doing all these things to make you upset, you also should bring in your ownership side of it to say like, what part do I have in this? Of course, there's extremes of where like, clearly there's things that are not acceptable and you have to have boundaries and draw the line or get out of relationships that aren't healthy. But again, using that discernment and that extreme ownership like helps you be able to see things more clearly.
Yeah. Yes. And that's also where you gain your power in life. Like this goes into that first shift in consciousness from victim mentality into co-creator. When you stop looking at external things as the things that are causing you to feel a certain way and actually turning inwards, you're taking back your power from the external things. And in relationships, I have found it so beautiful to actually look at my part in things and shift my own inner world and just see how that changes the dynamics in a relationship. So there have been like so many different points of being triggered in my relationship that I could have just as easily blamed Peter for, blamed him for the way that I was feeling, but I chose to take that as an opportunity to look within myself. And if a partner that you are with is not actually self-aware enough to understand the intricacies of triggers and what it means to actually turn inwards and analyze yourself, then you're going to constantly be at war with someone's ego. I don't know if you've ever heard about the like cycles of relationships, but you have the honeymoon phase where it's just pure love. You have all the like chemicals, oxytocin and all those love chemicals. And then as you go into like the 1.5 year mark, you slide into like more of a comfort level with each other where you're no longer presenting yourself in a specific way. It's actually just like your full self. So this is where the ego comes in and the shadow comes in. And it ties beautifully into what we're talking about, because if both partners are identifying with their ego, then it's going to be a battle of egos. But if you're able to become aware enough, then it becomes a container to heal those wounded parts of the ego.
Yes.
And then the next stage of this is actually deeper connection, where you're able to see someone for their full soul and their whole self, and you're able to love every part of them and help them heal. And you go into a deeper level of intimacy. And I think I heard once that when you're in a relationship, you'll get to that 1.5 year mark and you'll be like, oh, like I want the honeymoon phase back. But there's actually a new step to be looking for. Like there's a new level. You should be looking forward to a deeper level of intimacy, a deeper understanding of each other, instead of craving that like surface level honeymoon stuff.
Right.
There's a deeper level that's in the future to look forward to.
Right. And to get there is confronting the fear of being seen, the fear of your partner finally knowing that thing about you that you're so ashamed of. Like it's all these little things that if you can view it as those like seasons and those stages on the other side, like it is so true that the level of depth is 10 times better than the honeymoon phase. It's like you in the honeymoon phase, you have no idea how good it can get, how deep and how like on all levels, intimate, physical, emotional, spiritual, like that is your opportunity to go through the ringer with each other and to get to that place. And yeah, it can be uncomfortable in the moment, but I feel like relationships are one of those places where it really is true that when you put the work in and you work hard at being a fantastic partnership, the payoff is unreal. Like that's where you find life partners and people who you're like entangled. Like one cannot be described without the other. Like you are so deeply seeing each other's souls. But yeah, you have to be seen. You have to like give yourself the opportunity to put it out there and to like bare your soul to this person.
Right. And it does take work, but it's so worth it. Like how you're saying, everything just gets better. Like the intimacy, just you discover a different level of intimacy,
right.
Like a completely new kind of intimacy that you would never be able to have just with like a random person.
Yeah.
But it's just completely different.
Right.
And it does take work. It does take commitment. And I love the saying that love is a verb because it's like this choice to continuously see someone for their full soul self as opposed to the wounded self.
I love that so much because I feel like in the past few years, I came to really see that and understand that the idea of love as a verb and it being this choice, because it's like you have the type of love. I think I've said this before on the podcast, like the kind of love that's you can't help it. Like you just love them so much. It's innate. It's natural. It's like when you see a baby or a dog, you're like, you're so perfect. I love you so much. Like I want to eat you. I love you. Right. And then there's the kind of, you know, the saying was, you're so cute, I could eat you. Like it's the thing. It's like cuteness aggression. Like you literally can't help it. And then there's the kind of love that is the choice, what you're talking about, the verb of in moments of hardship or being triggered by the other person, choosing to take the action that will help you to come closer together, right? It's choosing to put your pride to the side, your ego to the side, and asking questions to understand them better. It's not like, oh, I want to win this argument so that I can feel good about myself. It's how do I put my shit aside and understand you and learn what you are saying, right? And sometimes your partner's not going to reciprocate that immediately, but that's okay. That is the choice to act in love and to say, I don't even need this in return. I'm going to do this because I know that for our partnership and for me and for you, it's the best thing is for me to want to understand you, to choose the higher road per se.
Yeah. And to view every dispute as not a me versus you, but a team versus the problem.
Yes.
This is another thing that what you just said reminded me of. It's like there are moments where the egos kind of take control, and let's say someone's triggered and all of a sudden there's like frustration and like a little bit of like a snippy comment. But then if you can become super conscious and aware in that moment and be like, wait, this isn't about me versus you. How can this actually be us versus this problem? What is it that's occurring under the surface here? And it's all about, life is all a game of like deeper levels of awareness and higher levels of consciousness. Mm-hmm. And you can apply that to your own single life. You can apply that to a partnership. You can apply it to your business. If there are moments where you can become more self-aware, you will always grow and expand and learn more about yourself. Mm-hmm. And especially through the challenge and the shadow parts. So I guess let's tie back into this fear of being seen and dive deeper into this in other areas of life. But has this fear of being seen been something that has been prominent for you with your business or in other areas of your life?
Yeah. Honestly, I am really glad that I had certain experiences through the era of COVID because they completely showed me that on the other side of getting over the fear of being seen and heard and, you know, speaking your truth and all the things, that on the other side of that comes so much alignment and so much liberation that you're like, fuck it, I'll walk through the fire any day because this is so liberating. And yeah, so my experience with that has just been, and I'll preface by saying, I honestly think I still have a lot more work to do on this. I think like in day-to-day life, we're all so deeply programmed to care about what other people think in a very unproductive way. Not like
It's the tribe mentality. We talked about
Yes.
this before, but it's literally wired in our brain.
Yes, it is fucking hardwired. And in our modern culture, there's also feels to be legitimate. Sometimes there actually are legitimate consequences that have been inflicted by the culture, whether that's cancel culture or the fact that in certain corporations, if you have a certain presence online, you'll get fired for opinions that are wrong in the mainstream. Like that's very real. And a lot of people
So crazy.
have experienced that. And especially in the last few years, especially in that 2020 to 2022 timeframe when things were so tense and so difficult, it felt like you literally could not actually say what you wanted, or there would be real repercussions, whether that was your family rejecting you or your job firing you or your friends rejecting you, right? So those are real things. And I think obviously like some people are in harder situations than others. And I probably had a situation where I had a bit more freedom for whatever reason to like be able to speak up. But my argument is that more people need to have the courage to speak freely and be seen and heard so that it lifts everybody else up, and the people who are like more disadvantaged and have more threats and risks to being fully like heard and seen and expressed, those people can do it, right? Like it's a group effort. So anyway, yeah, my experience with it was I just had so many opportunities. I view them as or so many opportunities to choose. Do I stay silent, stay with the pack, just choose a safe route, or do I say something, right? Do I put myself out there, whether that's in terms of who I am as an embodied person or my opinions, values, etc. And by choosing the latter and choosing to both start to have an online presence that was rooted in truth and authenticity. Also, when I used to work at a company, I also chose that same thing, to be rooted in truth and authenticity. And it was really hard. Like there were times where it was honestly scary, and I had confronted that feeling of thinking that nobody liked me and that I was like being like snickered at when I walked around the office. Like this was a very real fear I had. Despite that, because I'm a person who is I really try to be rooted in my values. It's not perfect, but it's something that I was like brought up with. And I think it's also just part of my design as a person, is like, I try to have my physical life and the people around me be like an embodiment of what I really believe in. And this is different from ideology. It's more just like core values. So anyways, my best example of this was at my workplace. I've told Nikki stories of this. Just to keep it general, I basically like stayed rooted in that value of being truthful and being authentic and saying what I think, right? Even when it's uncomfortable, especially then. And I the whole time thought that
During COVID.
Yes, this was during COVID. This was when I worked at a company in LA. And yeah, I just like, I don't know, it just, the examples are kind of irrelevant, but it's basically just that I embodied that value of tell the truth, put yourself out there, like say what you think. Don't fucking hold back because you think people aren't going to like it, right? So I do those things. And I had that fear the whole time that nobody liked me at this company and that like people secretly hated me. A really beautiful thing happened is that it was my last day. I was leaving. This was last year in April. It's August 2023. So this was April 2022. And when you have your last day at this company, they do something really nice called benedictions, which means the good word. And they basically say, everyone goes around and like says really nice things about you, like things that they, enjoyed from you or like good memories, right? They basically, you sit there and everybody tells you nice things. And I remember being so shocked because I was nervous for this. I thought like, oh my God, I don't know who's going to say anything. Like I was close with some people, but maybe I ruffled too many feathers, etc. And so many people said exactly that they were impressed by how much I honored my authenticity and how much I was willing to speak up about things I cared about. And people were genuinely like sad that I was leaving, because they were saying just that they felt I was someone who was willing to go against the norm and willing to be like fighting for what I believe in, and was well-rounded and like all these things. And I was so surprised, because I realized that people were seeing that core thing, even if they disagreed with me, even if whatever it was, they didn't, see eye to eye, they saw the deeper value that I was embodying. And that was such a beautiful moment for me, because I came to realize, and I remember I posted this on Instagram, this like text post about when you are seen as who you actually are, that kind of validation is actually real and matters, right? Versus being liked and validated for a false version of you. It feels icky and it doesn't sit well with your soul. But when you commit to being who you are and walking through the fire in order to be liberated and honor your authenticity, when people see that and validate that, that actually sits really well with your soul, because you're like, holy shit, people pick up on this, whether it's subconscious or conscious or whatever it is. People appreciate that vibration that you're living at, even if they don't agree with it or whatever it is. And that really showed me the positive repercussions of being seen, even when it's scary.
Your highest vibration is authenticity.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
That's super powerful. As you were saying that, I'm like thinking about the vibration of all this. And then you said the word vibration. Truly, you vibrate at a different frequency when you are truthful to what it is you truly believe. Yes. When you were outwardly truthful.
Yeah.
And this fear of being seen, you pretty much got over that fear of ultimately maybe being rejected.
Yeah.
Maybe being disliked. And I think that's what stops a lot of people, and I can relate to this in my own journey, of holding back from sharing your truth because of that. It's not really the fear of being seen. I think it goes deeper. It's the fear of being rejected. It's the fear of being disliked.
Exactly.
And to play that out in your head, I remember I was working with a coach through this exact same fear. And she had me play out the scenario of like, okay, let's play it out. What happens? What's the worst case of you speaking out about this? What's going to happen? And I'm like, people aren't going to like me. Yeah. And she was like, and then what? And it made me realize that we actually have this subconscious belief that we gain our own personal validation through the external, and we can actually self-validate. And It's really, really freaking powerful to hear your story, because you pretty much self-validated yourself.
Yes.
Self-validated yourself. Yes.
Yeah.
And got over the fear of being rejected. And even you sitting in that little meeting where they go around and share nice things about you, like that was the tipping point. Like, oh no, this is it. I'm going to be rejected. But
no one's going to say anything nice.
But it ultimately led to like a really beautiful breakthrough of you realizing that authenticity is very powerful. And even if people don't agree with you, there are people that will honor you being truthful to yourself.
Yes.
Because there's something really special and powerful about like embodied authenticity.
Yes. And this is making me think of what's interesting is what we're talking about is this kind of invisible, we're calling it a vibration, but you could call it like, it's kind of like that intangible essence of a person. And what's interesting is a lot of times I think people, they believe that they are being authentic, but a lot of times they're not aware of the person they've become in this context of the group they're in, the society, their tribe, and that they've actually adapted to fit in. And so you might go through a phase of life where you think you're being true to yourself, right? Like in high school, I probably thought I was being true to myself. I probably thought I was like living my best life and whatever. But of course, as I evolved and looked back, of course I was adapting. I was trying to fit into the group because that's what we do as tribal beings, right? It's really deep rooted. So what's interesting is when you come across a person that you can tell they've arrived at the thoughts that they have on their own. They've formed their own sense of self, their own opinions, viewpoints, ideologies, whatever it is, through a method that is actually honoring themselves. You can feel that, and it feels so much easier to be like, to accept that person, right? as opposed to the kinds of people that arrive at their opinions and their sense of self and their identity through adaptation to fit into a group, and because they think it's the right thing to do, because they're virtue signaling, they're value posturing, they're trying to look like a certain kind of person to other people. But you can always see through that, and you can always tell when someone has arrived at that, especially when you talk to them about their ideas and their opinions, when everything is sort of like parroted or paraphrased from common cultural ideas. It really speaks volumes about their authenticity and how they are acting as like this quote unquote authentic person, and whether that is through the path of thinking, you know, critical thinking, having experiences and coming to your own conclusions, or adapting to a tribal theme so that you can fit in.
Right. This like brings up such an important topic of like inner discernment and the true power of discernment. And your ability to hear information and to actually feel a sense of peace in your body so that you can determine if that sits with you is really powerful. And I think a lot of people have disconnected from this because of exactly what you're saying. This just like autopilot sense of just accepting anything as truth and not using critical thinking.
Right.
When you hear information, I mean, especially when it's rooted in fear.
Yes.
That makes you very open to just accepting solutions and accepting things as fact.
Right.
It is so freaking important that when you are listening to information, to bring your body into a state of presence and to check in with your own sense of discernment and your own sense of power from within, for you to make the decision on what sits right with you. And that's how you build what is authentic and valuable to yourself.
Yes.
Self, like your own self, not the tribe.
Right. Yes. I mean, this is kind of, I think this is why in 2020, 2021, when COVID started and simultaneously there was this massive spiritual awakening.
Oh yeah.
Because of that, it's crazy how all of this kind of makes sense. Is exactly what you're saying. People became so much more self-reflective. They spent time alone, right? People had awakenings to realize whatever higher level of consciousness they stepped into. With that, you have people meditating more, maybe doing breath work, maybe reading more books about mindfulness, et cetera, et cetera. People started to become so much calmer in a way than our society was. Like we were like a train running to a track with no end or whatever. We were like about to run off a fucking mountain as a culture before 2020. People like lots of unconsciousness, just so much on the opposite of mindfulness, right? 2020 strikes, people start having these spiritual awakenings, and it kind of makes sense that you have people starting to pop up who are disagreeing with the common narrative or just literally thinking for themselves, like are just breaking out of the autopilot that they were in because they are at home, they're calmer. I mean, not everyone, right? A lot of people stayed in fear, and that's exactly why most, there's people who stayed in fear, stayed like blind to following everything that we now know has been proven to be completely untrue. But people who were able to see through the veil are the ones who are able to check in with themselves, create a calm environment to actually understand reality from.
Yes. I view COVID and all of 2020 as the world's dark night of the soul. Yeah. It was our dark night.
Yeah.
It was a challenge we were meant to go through to shake us and wake us up. And some people didn't wake up and some people did, and that's okay. But I do believe that COVID served a purpose.
Yes.
And I remember I was at an expo recently, and I was listening to someone's talk, and someone raised their hand and they were like, if you believe everything happens for a reason, like why did COVID happen? Oh, it was my coach giving the talk, because now I remember she was the one. She said, well, everyone who woke up during COVID, like raise your hand if that was like the trigger to your awakening. And like a half of the room raised their hand. And it just was such a powerful reminder that even through the chaos and even through discomfort, things are always happening for a higher purpose, because I truly don't think I would be aware and awake to the things that I'm aware and awake to without having gone through like that really shitty period in our timeline of this world.
It's the inciting incident that dude, triple parallel happening here. The Barbie episode, we talked about her having her inciting incident that makes her question her reality. COVID was the inciting incident for people to question their reality and become awakened. In relationships, your triggers, your fights, your arguments, the shit that you go through is your inciting incident to question your reality, to question your relationship, to question yourself, to dig deeper. They're like, I have full body chills right now because it's like seeing the spiritual path in so many aspects of our life, and that you can view these darker shadow experiences that feel hard and difficult. And why would this happen? Why would this ever happen to me? Why do bad things happen? Maybe we can bring in that spiritual truth to say, this is your inciting incident for going so much higher, for learning about the truth, the beauty of life, any and everything that raises your consciousness into being more loving, more aware, more grateful, more joyful. Like, you need the inciting incident or else it doesn't happen.
Right. And sometimes people get stuck in that low because they're so identified with things happening to them.
Yes.
So if you can actually zoom out and start to see, what are you calling it? An inciting incident? I've never heard this before.
So I don't know if I made this term up, but an incite.
I like it.
An inciting incident, I think it's a term that sometimes is found in movie scripts of basically what causes the character to suddenly go like in a different direction or start their adventure. So like, yeah, I think inciting moment, meaning like it starts something new, and the incident being like the specific, event or whatever, realization. Like Barbie's inciting incident is she wakes up that morning and like things are kind of weird and her feet go flat and she's thinking about death, and that causes her to go on to a new like exploration.
Right. And that's exactly it. When you're in those moments, you're going so deep into the darkness that you're forced to separate yourself and say, whoa, like what's happening here? How can I actually check in with myself to see what's happening? With COVID, we were so deep in the darkness, so deep in the programming and the forced control that it caused us to be like, holy crap, has this been going on the whole time?
Yeah.
Is this what's going on? I was like full awake mode. I was like, holy crap. I can't believe I was so asleep for this entirety of my life up until this point. And it was such a moment for me to really check in with what is true to me, just to like circle back to checking in with yourself. You have this like inner innate wisdom that is available to you always, whether you call it your intuition, like your inner guidance, your inner compass, your gut. You have that within you always. And you can always turn towards that to check in with when it is you're wanting to make a decision, or when it is you're wanting to develop a sort of like discernment towards a situation. And it's really, really special when you develop a really deep relationship to that, because then you no longer need the things outside of you to validate within. You actually have your own inner validation system.
Yes.
And you are very trusting of that as you continue to lean into it.
Yeah.
Which reminds me of like a little practice that Victoria, my neighbor, she taught me that when she checks in with herself on like what food she should eat, she does something called a body check. Have you ever heard of this?
I think so. Yeah.
She'll like she does it when she's food shopping too. She'll like hold a piece of the food up, like she'll take the food up to her chest. And if she leans forward, it's a yes. And if she leans back, it's a no.
Oh, it's like using your body as a pendulum.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's like, I mean, this is, if you can have that habit of what you're saying, check in with yourself, body check, ask your intuition, ask your gut, whatever it is, that gives you such clear instruction. The issues arise when we ignore that, or we think, well, I don't really want to be friends with this person anymore. That's what my gut says, but I feel like it's unfortunate and I should probably still be friends. Like that's where you get into things that you are not aligned for you anymore, because you're ignoring the truth that's inside of you, right? And you access that truth through all the things we talk about, the meditation, the stillness, the silence, the breath work, all of these things that are for the goal of becoming more aligned and being able to take the action that is true for you.
Right. I mean, let's talk a little bit about the fear behind that. Why is it that people are not trusting of their intuition? Because I feel like there's a lot of things that can happen to hold us back from connecting to that. One of them being what you're saying, like not actually tuning inwards with the practices and creating that stillness to connect. But another thing can be the fear of not trusting oneself. When you don't trust the answers that come from within yourself, you're going to look outward for answers always. So it's developing that sense of trust with self. How do you feel like you've developed trust with yourself?
Yeah, I think it's just one of those things where the more action you take on ideas, desires, intuition hits, the more data you collect on how things are feeling and working out. And yeah, sometimes maybe you take action on a desire and it turned out to not be the right one, but nonetheless, it propelled you forward some way because you learned, right? So it's really just that action bias of just spend more time embodying or taking action toward whatever the intuition hit is, the download. If you, in the middle of the night, think of something super profound, you write it down and then you share it on Instagram the next day and it resonates, like, right? You give yourself these opportunities to see how things play out. And I think that's what young people really need to hear is like, it's not that every time your intuition or your idea needs to be the quote unquote right one or needs to be like life changing. It's more that the more you do it, the more you can course correct and figure out, maybe that intuitive hit was actually out of fear. Okay, now I know that, right? And then you start to figure out what the difference is between the fear versus intuition versus, though that was actually like a really deep subconscious programming I had from my parents, right? So the more that you just explore living intuitively, you get more feedback on how it's working out. So it doesn't actually have to be like every time it's profound and life-changing. Like there's plenty of times that I've tried ideas out or done things that I'm sure were my intuition, but maybe they were just giving me that, I was just given that opportunity to learn something or to figure out that it wasn't aligned for me, which is equally as valuable.
Yeah, powerful. I like what you're saying too about like the course correcting, because there are going to be moments in your journey that are meant for you, but they're meant for you to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And you're meant to kind of mess up and fuck up at certain points of your path, but that's also there to serve you. I know in my business, the fear of being seen has something that I have also worked through immensely. And for me, it started out as like the fear of judgment from the people close to me that probably don't necessarily agree with the way that I see the world. And I actually don't know deeply what a lot of people from, I don't know, my hometown or
yeah,
maybe there are people that see eye to eye with the way that I see the world, and maybe there aren't, and that's okay. But sometimes I get in my head about, it's like almost viewing the people that I know I have like energetic cords with and thinking about what kind of energy I'm getting from them. Is it validation? Is it approval? Is it disapproval? Is it liked? Is it disliked? Is it being disliked? And really working towards cutting those cords and not allowing that energy to be something that is either fueling me or not fueling me. So as you're on this journey of just unapologetically being seen, it's really important to not only remove the rejection and the dislikes from getting into your field, but to also not take up too much space for that validation that comes externally, because then you're also dependent on that to fuel you. So it's really about having that healthy relationship with your own inner validation and kind of cutting all energetic cords, even if it's not to say we have to cut all bad energetic cords, but not to be constantly fueled by the external validation.
Right. Yes. No, totally. I mean, it's crazy how many people don't go for their dreams literally because they are afraid what their hometown friends or family is going to say. Like, it's just so common and deeply ingrained to stay where you are or stay in the certainty because you think someone's going to say something to you or think, like, first of all, so much of the time you never actually hear what the person thinks, right? Which arguably makes it worse because you're like, oh my God, are they sitting at home and judging me and thinking about me when they have all their friends over? Are they scrolling on my Instagram being like, oh, what a stupid batch? Like your mind goes, but here's the thing. Number one, if they're doing that, who cares? Like you have to decide for yourself, are you going to live your life being like 80 years old and being like, yeah, I didn't do the thing because I thought that my hometown friends who are all dead now were going to think that I'm a fucking loser. Like
Jimmy from high school, I thought he was going to judge me.
Right. And it's like, you know, this is, I feel like it sounds so cliche, but it's worth giving that reminder of it's worth just going and seeing what happens. Because I could tell you another story of like, I don't have many like close friends anymore from high school, mostly just growing apart and just, you know, whatever, growing apart, not being in the same state anymore. And I remember I saw so many people from my high school for the first time in like 4 or 5 years the night before Thanksgiving. Because I don't know if your hometown does this, but we have this thing where like every Wednesday night before Thanksgiving, everyone goes to the same bar and everyone gets like fucking shit-faced. And I didn't drink because I have been doing this whole sober thing. And I saw so many people that I went to high school with. And you know what almost every single person said is they were so curious about what I was up to and how it was like doing my own thing. And everyone was like, wow, it's so cool that you're blah, 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 blah. And I was like, oh my God, you guys are like, that's what you think? Like, that's cool. Like, it's like people, you never know. And it's kind of fun to give yourself the opportunity to let people have an opinion. And even if they don't think it's cool, like, again, your inner validation is so much more important. You're the one alone on your bed at night going to sleep. Like, sometimes you have to just hammer that in to be like, stop fucking caring about what people think. It is not the most important thing. And it will make you unstoppable to stop caring about that.
So how do we do that? We just let go of we let go of the care around being disliked. I think that's the key. Like,
yeah,
you have to be okay with being perceived as crazy or ridiculous or insane. You have to get out of your mind.
No, but I mean, what I was going to share was, so I started to tell Nikki about this. I have a really close family friend who it was kind of like a long time coming that he had all these ideas of things he wanted to do. And he had so much potential in him, right? Like just amazing person. He's got so much brewing. But for just years, it was like a little, I don't know, like just hit or miss, would kind of fall into like doing activities that weren't super aligned, whatever. He did this challenge where for 30 days, he was going to listen to this subconscious reprogramming, like meditation, if you will. It's like 15, 20 minutes of this. It's this very intense recording that at first sounds like a kidnapper voice. It's like this deeper, it's like this is the impersonation of it. It's like, I am an incredible person at my job. I am immune to depression. Like it's this really deep voice over music and it's like layered. So it says like the I version of the affirmation and it says the you version. So it'll say like, I am immune to depression. You are immune to depression. And it's like 20 minutes of that. Okay. And it has all sorts of like statements in it that are like, I do not give a fuck about what others think about me. Like, I am unstoppable. Like, I have boundless energy. It's like the most amazing, intense affirmations. So he listened to this for 30 days straight. And his wife was telling me that the 180 in this man of how unstoppable and capable he has become is fucking crazy. And she was saying it is literally because this thing has helped him reprogram not giving a fuck about what other people think. And that shows up in work, right? Like he's taking on projects that he actually wants to do. He's doing great in meetings. He's an amazing leader. He's making sales. He's also like super present with like his baby and his wife when it's like no work time. He works like all day, but is like still getting great sleep. Like because he has been rewiring, not thinking about others' perception of him, it has freed him to do what he actually wants to do. And that's the key because it's stopping you. It's affecting your actions. It's affecting the way you think about yourself. Like it's literally taking you away from where you want to be.
This is really inspiring me. And I need that link.
I'll send it to you. Honestly, I'll link it in the description of the show. I want to give a caveat. The like marketing copy of this thing is very intense. It's like it's made for, I think it's very tailored towards men, and it has some language that's like a bit intense. But
okay, maybe I'll make my own then.
Maybe make your own. I'll send it to you anyway, and so you can like check it out. But the copy, like the marketing copy of this is like, skull fuck your enemies, like you will be boundless. It's like intense, but the affirmation recording itself is great. It's like, whatever, it's intense, but like sometimes that's what it takes to rewire your subconscious to like be authentic to yourself. So yeah.
Love that. Well, we touched on a lot. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add in about this fear of being seen?
No, I mean, I think we covered it. I said a lot of things.
Yeah, we covered a lot. All right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will see you next Wednesday.